Welcome to True Echo, where real moments meet unforgettable justice. Today's story is a powerful tale of quiet strength, shocking arrogance, and one woman's unwavering stand for dignity at 30,000 feet. When a black CEO is told she doesn't belong in first class, what unfolds next stops the entire flight. Stay with us, because this isn't just about one seat, it's about what happens when you refuse to be disrespected, and the whole world sees the truth. The first-class cabin of Skyventure Airlines was unusually quiet as passengers settled in for the late evening flight from New York to San Francisco. The soft hum of the engines and the rustle of luxury travel bags created a calming rhythm. Olivia Bennett, dressed in a sleek navy business suit and minimalist pearl earrings, walked down the aisle with the calm assurance of someone used to moving through elite spaces, but not always being welcomed into them. As CEO of Skyventure Airlines, Olivia had just come from a high-level meeting that ended late. Exhausted, she was looking forward to reviewing her notes and getting a few hours of rest before landing. She glanced at her boarding pass, seat 1E, right next to the window, her favorite spot. But as she approached her seat, something unexpected stopped her. A man, white, late 50s, dressed in a smug blend of expensive comfort, was already sprawled across seats 1E and 1F. He had spread out a gray cashmere blanket, tossed his shoes in the aisle, and was barking into his phone. When he noticed Olivia approach, he didn't move. Instead, he draped his arm over the empty seat and declared, "This whole row is mine. I need to lie down." Olivia blinked. "I believe you're mistaken. 1E is my assigned seat." The man barely looked up. "Surely, you can find somewhere else to sit," he said dismissively. "People like me pay extra for this kind of space. People like me." Olivia remained composed, lifting her phone and gently displaying her digital boarding pass. "As I said, this is my seat. My name is Olivia Bennett." Still refusing to make eye contact, the man snorted. "Figures. Must be some upgrade error. They let anyone in these days." Then, with an added sneer, he muttered, "You should know your place." The air in the cabin shifted. Conversation stopped. Several passengers glanced over, frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or simply record the incident on their phones. Olivia could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she kept her posture straight and voice firm. "I do know my place," she said evenly. "And it's right here in 1E." His eyes finally met hers, and for a second, there was confusion, even recognition. But he dismissed it. "Look, sweetheart. I don't care who you are." That was his first mistake. For a few tense seconds, Olivia Bennett stood perfectly still, her eyes locked with Richard Thompson's. The name had not escaped her notice. He was the CEO of an investment firm with a notorious record for ignoring diversity and union standards. She'd once declined his firm's offer to buy a 12% stake in Skyventure. Now, it appeared, he hadn't even recognized her. The tension rippled through the cabin like a taut string ready to snap. Olivia could feel the weight of every glance, every silent judgment cast her way, not for being wrong, but for daring to claim her space as a black woman in a place where power and privilege often spoke the loudest. But Olivia didn't just belong there, she helped build it. Before she could respond, a flight attendant approached. Young, blonde, clearly nervous, she leaned in, attempting to placate the situation. "Excuse me, sir," she began gently. "This seat does belong to her, Ms. Bennett, according to the manifest." Richard didn't even flinch. "I already told her. I have a medical condition. I need both seats." His tone was laced with superiority, as if his fabricated discomfort outweighed someone else's right to exist. Olivia turned to the attendant, whose name tag read Emily. She gave the young woman a soft nod, signaling that she didn't want her to press further, for now. Emily hesitated, then quietly retreated. Olivia returned her attention to Richard. "You may not recognize me," she said, her tone calm but pointed. "But I know exactly who you are. And more importantly, I know who I am." Richard gave a sardonic laugh. Is this supposed to scare me? Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back, reached into her elegant tote, and pulled out her tablet. With a few taps, she activated Operation Silent Wing, an internal protocol used for handling high-risk, disruptive behavior from passengers that could tarnish the airline's reputation or compromise security. Within 60 seconds, Richard's phone lost Wi-Fi access. He frowned, trying to reconnect. Nothing. Ugh. The network's down, he muttered, glancing around. He was the type to think that an inconvenience was a personal offense. Around him, other passengers' devices still worked. Only his had gone dark. He didn't know that Skyventure's internal tech team had already flagged him. Olivia had seen to that. She quietly walked 2 steps back, arms crossed, not saying a word. The air had turned thick, the silence louder than any voice. Passengers were watching with breath held, wondering who she really was. Then, a quiet voice from 3 rows back broke the silence. Wait, aren't you Olivia Bennett? The CEO of Skyventure? The sentence hovered in the air like a dropped pin in a cathedral. All eyes turned. The weight of realization dawned visibly on several faces. Some looked stunned. Others, hopeful. But none more shocked than Richard. He blinked, suddenly unsure. His jaw tensed. Olivia gave no verbal confirmation. She didn't need to. Her face was enough. Her grace was confirmation. Her restraint was power. For the first time, Richard faltered. But pride is a stubborn thing, especially in men who have never been told no, so he sneered again, raising his voice for dramatic effect. CEO or not, I'm not moving. Who do you think you are? Silence again. Except this time, it wasn't just discomfort. It was disbelief. Passengers began to murmur. Cameras zoomed in. TikTok was already humming with content. And somewhere in Richard's gut, the sinking sensation began to bloom, slow, but unmistakable. Olivia turned toward the window, allowing her silence to speak volumes. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman muttered loudly, "This is disgusting." More voices joined in. Entitled jerk. He should be removed. She's the CEO. Still, Olivia remained composed. Dignity, she'd always believed, wasn't just about defending oneself, it was about refusing to stoop. Emily returned, this time with Kevin Brooks, the lead flight attendant. Older, with salt and pepper hair and decades of flight experience behind him, Kevin had seen many incidents, but few that simmered like this. "Mr. Thompson," Kevin said firmly, "if you don't return to your assigned seat, we will be forced to delay takeoff. That means grounding the flight." "You wouldn't dare," Richard snapped. "We already have," Kevin replied coolly. "We are not cleared for takeoff until this is resolved." The passengers groaned, not at Olivia, but at Richard. Suddenly, it was he who was inconveniencing everyone. Richard's power, once rooted in money and status, began to collapse around him, suffocated by the reality that no amount of wealth could buy back dignity once lost. Olivia didn't need to lift a finger. The system she built was working exactly as intended. And Richard Thompson was now the very man being watched, judged, and, soon, removed. Richard Thompson slumped back into the seat he tried so confidently to steal. But gone was his self-assured smirk. His blanket lay crumpled like his pride, and the scowl on his face couldn't mask the truth. Everyone had seen what just happened, and no one was on his side. Across the aisle, Olivia Bennett sat in the seat she had rightfully claimed, her expression a masterclass in poise and restraint. The boarding pass still rested lightly in her hand, though now it felt less like a ticket and more like a symbol, a quiet, undeniable claim to the space she had earned through years of relentless perseverance. Passengers whispered among themselves. One young woman mouthed, "That's her," to her friend while discreetly filming. A man in a tailored suit nodded toward Olivia with visible respect. Meanwhile, Richard sat in an awkward, hostile silence, fidgeting as the consequences of his actions began to ripple outward. He tried to distract himself, checking his phone again, still no signal. Skyventure's internal tech lockdown, activated by Olivia moments earlier, remained in full effect. To Richard, it felt like the world was closing in. He was used to wielding control, not being cut off from his digital kingdom. As the cabin returned to a nervous hush, another figure appeared in the aisle. It was Alex Murphy, Skyventure's vice president of risk management. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing a navy suit and an expression like carved granite, he was the kind of executive you only saw when things were about to change dramatically. Alex walked straight toward Olivia, but his eyes briefly flicked toward Richard with a cool sharpness. "Miss Bennett," Alex said, his tone respectful, loud enough for others to hear. "We've been monitoring the situation from the ground. I want to personally assure you that it is being addressed accordingly." Olivia gave a small, polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Murphy." Richard blinked in confusion. "You're seriously sending someone on board for her?" Alex turned to Richard with a level stare. "Mr. Thompson, I'm here for the integrity of this airline. And right now, you are the disruption." That word, disruption, landed with the weight of a lawsuit in Richard's ears. He opened his mouth to protest, but Alex was already one step ahead. "You've ignored crew instructions. You refused to move from an assigned seat. You disrupted boarding procedures. And you attempted to intimidate a passenger, one who happens to be this airline's chief executive." A few passengers gave soft claps of approval. Others raised their eyebrows, watching Richard as if he were a failed actor caught in the final act of a tragedy. "You think this is about a seat?" Richard barked. "I've been flying first class longer than she's been alive." Alex remained calm. "And yet it only took her one moment to earn more respect than you have in a lifetime." That line drew audible gasps. It wasn't just firm, it was final. Richard's face flushed deep red. He stared at Olivia, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. This was no longer her fight, it was now a full-scale rejection of everything Richard represented. Alex stepped forward slightly. "You have two options, Mr. Thompson. Remain seated without further incident. Or disembark with security when we return to the gate. But understand this, any further outburst, and we will place you on the airline's no-fly list pending investigation." It was the first time Richard had ever heard someone threaten to take something from him he couldn't buy back. He clenched his fists. He stared straight ahead. "I'll sit," he muttered bitterly. Alex gave a nod and stepped away. The cabin exhaled again, this time for real. Emily returned to the front, giving Olivia a brief smile of admiration. Kevin, the lead attendant, adjusted his tie, signaling to the pilot that the situation was under control. The plane would finally take off. But the story was just beginning. Because while Richard sat, humiliated and fuming, passengers were already uploading video clips. One, titled, "White Exec Steals Seat from Black CEO, Gets Humiliated," hit 100K views before the plane even left the ground. Another, "Olivia Bennett vs. Entitled Passenger," was trending on X, formerly Twitter, within the hour. And in that rare moment of silence before liftoff, Olivia allowed herself a single breath of satisfaction. Not because she had one. But because she hadn't had to raise her voice to make the world listen. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the first-class cabin had settled into a stiff, awkward quiet. But the calm on the surface couldn't mask the undercurrent of tension that pulsed between Olivia Bennett and Richard Thompson. He remained hunched in his seat, arms folded tightly, jaw locked as if chewing on the bitter flavor of humiliation. He'd always considered himself untouchable. A man with money, connections, and clout. He sat on the boards of 3 corporations, lectured at Ivy League business schools, and once negotiated a 9-figure merger over a single lunch. But now, stripped of his digital lifeline, drowned in public judgment, and boxed in beside the very woman he tried to belittle, he had never felt smaller. Olivia, on the other hand, was the picture of serenity. She had slipped on her reading glasses and was calmly flipping through a presentation deck on her tablet. To the casual observer, she appeared completely unbothered. But inwardly, she was thinking about the thousands of women, especially black women, who had stories like this. The difference was, today, the world was watching. An hour into the flight, a flight attendant appeared with a tray and a message. "Miss Bennett," she said softly, "the galley has prepared a special meal for you, compliments of the crew." Olivia blinked, caught slightly off guard. "Oh. That wasn't necessary." "It was," the attendant replied, her voice sincere. "We just wanted to say thank you, for how you handled all of that." Olivia accepted the tray with a gracious nod. The gesture was simple, but profound. Not because of what it offered, but because of who had offered it, people who'd quietly seen what others had ignored. The invisible labor of navigating daily disrespect was finally, if briefly, being acknowledged. From the corner of her eye, Olivia could feel Richard shift. His eyes lingered on the tray for a second too long. Then he scoffed and turned away. But that wasn't what stung him the most. It was the way everyone else responded. The crew smiled at Olivia. Passengers leaned toward her, offering approving nods or soft thank yous. Even a few seated behind them gently tapped her shoulder just to say, "I saw. And I'm with you." Richard, meanwhile, couldn't make eye contact with anyone. His face was slowly becoming the symbol of everything wrong with unchecked privilege. What he thought was just a minor scuffle over seats had spiraled into something far more dangerous, a reputational implosion. When the flight finally touched down in San Francisco, passengers began checking their phones, and the full weight of the internet came crashing in. Richard's name was trending. Badly. #Richard Thompson sat under the #, #SkyVentureJustice, accompanied by thousands of furious tweets and viral video clips. A post with 2.1 million views read: "A black woman calmly stood her ground against blatant racism, and turns out, she was the CEO of the entire airline. Richard Thompson just made the biggest mistake of his public life." Another clip had captions like, "Entitled exec thought he could bully his way through first class. He forgot whose airline it was." And one TikTok user stitched together a dramatic slow-motion cut of Olivia walking to her seat while text on the screen read, "This isn't just any passenger, this is the boss." The comments exploded. "We stan Olivia Bennett. Sis dragged him without even raising her voice. CEOs like her make me believe again." Richard's own phone lit up with missed calls, his PR firm, board members, even his wife. The flight wasn't even fully at the gate yet, and the fallout had begun. He tried to push his way toward the front to get off first, desperate to escape the whispers behind him, but Kevin, the lead attendant, calmly blocked him. "Sir, we'll need you to remain until Miss Bennett deplanes. Standard priority protocol." It wasn't standard. Olivia hadn't requested it. But Kevin, like everyone else on that flight, had made a choice. And Richard had made his. As Olivia stepped off the plane, she was met by 2 SkyVenture corporate representatives and 2 airport security personnel. Not for her, but for Richard. He was officially placed under review, pending further action for causing an in-flight disturbance and violating the airline's code of conduct. He'd never felt so small, and for once, no amount of money could fix it. Olivia, meanwhile, walked calmly toward the terminal, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. What happened on that plane wasn't a personal triumph. It was a public reckoning. And it wasn't over yet. The next morning, the front page of every major business outlet featured the same image, a still shot from a passenger's video showing Olivia Bennett calmly standing while Richard Thompson flailed and argued beside her. The headline from the New York Herald read, "Power and Poise, Airline CEO faces bigotry at 30,000 feet, and wins without a word." Within hours, Olivia's name trended globally. News segments played the confrontation on loop, and her quiet resolve was heralded across social media as a masterclass in leadership under pressure. Celebrities tweeted their support. Business professors cited the incident as a case study in professional grace. A university in Boston even invited Olivia to deliver its upcoming commencement speech. But for Olivia, fame was never the goal. She didn't crave the spotlight, she only wanted justice, and a better culture within the walls of the airline she'd worked so hard to transform. She'd fought her entire career to bring integrity to Skyventure. What happened on that flight wasn't about her ego, it was about standing for what was right, even when others remained silent. Meanwhile, Richard Thompson's world began collapsing by the hour. First, his company's board released a statement distancing themselves from his actions. The behavior displayed by Mr. Thompson does not reflect the values of our firm. We are conducting a full internal review. Next came the suspension from 3 advisory boards he sat on, followed by the cancellation of a keynote speech he was set to deliver in Zurich. Law firms that once begged for his business suddenly wouldn't return his calls. Then came the worst blow, a viral email leak from within his own company. A mid-level employee had forwarded an internal memo where Richard blamed a hypersensitive culture, and accused Olivia of orchestrating the whole thing for attention. The backlash was immediate and savage. Blaming the victim after publicly disrespecting a black woman in her rightful seat? This man just signed his career's death certificate, one popular blogger posted, racking up over 400,000 likes. Still, Richard refused to apologize. At least, not at first. He holed himself up in his penthouse, nursing the last shreds of his pride. For the first time in his life, his money couldn't save him. No press spin could undo the footage. No private email or exclusive dinner could win back the public's favor. He had become a symbol of everything wrong with corporate entitlement. But Olivia didn't gloat. She didn't mock him. She didn't even speak his name again. Instead, she returned to Skyventure's headquarters and called an emergency meeting with her executive team. "There's no victory," she said quietly, standing before the glass wall that overlooked the city. "Not unless we turn this into something lasting." The room nodded in unison. Olivia outlined a new initiative, one that would become Skyventure's largest internal reform effort in decades. She proposed mandatory training in anti-discrimination, racial bias awareness, and equity in customer service. But more than that, she wanted systems in place that empowered employees at all levels to stand up to injustice, without fear of retaliation. "We're not just an airline," she said. "We're a vessel for humanity. We take people from one place to another, but who we are while we do it, that's what defines us." The plan passed unanimously. The next morning, Skyventure's website unveiled the campaign. Airspace for all, building respect at 30,000 feet. The public response was overwhelming. Shareholders supported the initiative, calling it a model for other corporations to follow. Civil rights groups reached out to collaborate. Olivia's inbox flooded with letters from people, young girls, aspiring CEOs, even retired flight attendants, thanking her for showing that leadership could look like strength wrapped in silence. Richard Thompson, on the other hand, had no such redemption. Days after Olivia launched the campaign, his company's board made their move. In a swift 8-1 vote, they requested his resignation. When he refused, citing contract clauses and personal loyalty, they voted again, this time to remove him by force. His reign ended not with applause, but with a quiet email from the company's legal team. And just like that, Richard Thompson, the man who once refused to give up a seat, was permanently grounded. Olivia Bennett sat in her corner office at Skyventure headquarters, the soft hum of the city barely audible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. On her desk, tucked beneath a stack of quarterly reports and policy drafts, lay a slightly crumpled boarding pass, Seat 1E. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't even framed. It was just a quiet reminder of how quickly dignity can be challenged and how resolutely it must be defended. Across the hall, Olivia's assistant knocked gently before entering. "Miss Bennett," she said, CNN and Bloomberg just confirmed your interview. And your commencement address at Harvard was approved for next quarter. They've called you a modern-day Rosa Parks of aviation. Olivia exhaled, resting a hand on the boarding pass. Let's not make it about me. Let's make it about what we're building. She had no interest in being a media darling. But if the world was finally listening, she would use that attention to amplify the right message, that respect in society isn't negotiable, and silence in the face of disrespect is no longer acceptable. She had no interest in fame, only in cultural change. The "Airspace for All" campaign swept across the industry in ways Olivia hadn't imagined. Major airlines announced their own internal reviews. Transportation unions reached out to adopt Skyventure's employee protections. And a coalition of black female executives launched a new alliance to support young women rising in corporate ranks, citing Olivia's leadership as their spark. Meanwhile, Richard Thompson's life had become a slow implosion. The silence that followed his public downfall was not the quiet of peace, but of exile. He'd moved out of the city and retreated to his coastal home. The gate once lined with paparazzi now stood cold, the press long having moved on. His phone buzzed less and less. No more board meetings, no more gala invitations, no more private jets. He was a relic of a system no longer willing to excuse arrogance wrapped in influence. One evening, he sat at the edge of his stone patio, watching the waves crash against the cliffs below. A tablet lay beside him. On the screen was Olivia's latest press conference. She stood with 3 young black interns behind her, announcing a new mentorship pipeline. Leadership, she said, isn't about who you command. It's about how many people you lift up while you're climbing. Richard scoffed and turned the screen away. But the words burrowed deep, because he knew he had spent his whole life doing the opposite. He'd stepped on people to ascend. And now, standing at the top, there was no one left beside him. The silence wasn't peace, it was judgment. Across the country, Olivia walked the halls of Skyventure's Chicago operations hub. Employees, mechanics, flight attendants, data engineers, greeted her with pride. In the hangar, a young trainee approached her nervously. "Miss Bennett," he said. "I was thinking of quitting last month. Felt like I didn't belong. But after what you did, I just want you to know, I'm staying." Olivia smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Then we're both where we belong." The weight of leadership didn't rest lightly on her shoulders. But in that moment, she realized something: this fight wasn't only hers. It was a collective one, bigger than Seat 1E, bigger than Skyventure. And it was just beginning. Weeks turned into months. The echoes of that unforgettable flight, the confrontation, the silent standoff, the global reckoning, did not fade. If anything, they grew louder in their legacy. Olivia Bennett didn't dwell on the day Richard Thompson tried to claim what wasn't his. She didn't need to. The world had done the remembering for her. What mattered now was the path she'd paved for others. An airline once known solely for luxury and profits was becoming a symbol of human dignity at scale. Inside Skyventure's newly launched Training and Integrity Center in Dallas, flight attendants and ground staff huddled in breakout rooms, undergoing one of Olivia's signature training sessions. At the front of one classroom, the opening slide of a presentation read, "The 1E standard: every passenger, every person, deserves respect." Back in her office, Olivia stood quietly, gazing out over the city skyline. She held a letter in her hand, an invitation to speak before the United Nations Annual Panel on Equity in Global Industries. Her name had joined a growing list of trailblazers reshaping what corporate leadership could mean. And yet, none of it made her forget who she truly was. She thought often about the woman she used to be, the one hustling on the tarmac as a junior analyst, the one passed over for promotions, the one who had to prove her worth 10 times over. Now, her story was taught in leadership programs and DEI seminars. But Olivia didn't let that change her. Instead, she quietly kept the same seat in the cafeteria, chatted with janitors by name, and still rode economy when flying personally. Across the country, in a coastal town far from Wall Street's flashing lights, Richard Thompson's days dragged on in obscurity. His LinkedIn profile had been deactivated. His company scrubbed most references to his past leadership. At social events, people avoided his gaze. He tried to spin the narrative in private circles, that he was cancelled for nothing, that it was all a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. They'd seen the videos. Heard the words. Witnessed the entitlement. One evening, as rain tapped softly on his glass windows, Richard opened an old email chain, one that had once buzzed with congratulations, power moves, merger deals. Now it was silent. His eyes drifted to a new video, trending on YouTube. How Olivia Bennett changed aviation forever, the flight that grounded privilege. He couldn't bring himself to click. He simply stared at the thumbnail. A freeze frame of Olivia, standing with her boarding pass, chin high, calm in the storm. And for the first time in a very long time, Richard Thompson felt the weight of something foreign and unfamiliar, remorse. Back in Atlanta, Olivia walked through a small neighborhood school where she had once volunteered as a teenager. She'd come to speak to the students, most of whom didn't yet know the weight of her name. A young black girl raised her hand and asked shyly, "Were you scared, when he told you to move?" Olivia knelt down beside her and said, "I wasn't scared. I was certain. Because I knew I belonged. And so do you." Those words settled in the room like a sacred promise. As Olivia left the school that day, she passed a mural in progress. At the center was her face, not drawn in grandiosity, but in quiet resolve. Beneath it were the words. Real power doesn't raise its voice. It takes its seat. That seat, 1E, had become more than a row number. It was a movement. A call to action. A reminder to never shrink in the presence of arrogance. To never trade dignity for comfort. To never assume silence means surrender. And as the world continued to fly, Seat 1E on every Skyventure aircraft remained reserved, not for any particular person, but for the principle Olivia Bennett had proven, that respect is non-negotiable, and dignity will never be denied its rightful place. What happened to Olivia Bennett wasn't just about a seat, it was about standing tall in the face of arrogance and quietly reminding the world what real leadership looks like. Her story teaches us that strength doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is sit firmly in your truth. If Olivia's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Would you have handled the situation like she did? Let us know in the comments. And for more true stories that echo with strength, courage, and justice, subscribe to True Echo. Because truth deserves to be heard.